The Second Amendment is a ludicrous historical antique, and it's time for it to go. Now, sooner or later, change will come, and the younger Americans won't tolerate this constitutional delusion much longer. Now, those of us who are not gun fetishes are supposed to keep our powder dry on the subject, but it has to be said: the Second Amendment is as antique as a muzzle-loaded long gun, and it should be treated as a historical artifact. We're not even supposed to whisper such things because the NRA, which is the National Redneck Alliance, and the right wing extremists have sensible Americans, including many gun owners, that are so bullied and cowed that we were only allowed to hope for sensible gun safety legislation around the edges of their highly profitable assault on American lives. And we've also said it for many years before, but it's also worth repeating for the millions of younger people coming to voting age each year who may have not considered it before. It doesn't take a grammarian or a constitutional scholar to tell you that the opening clause of the Second Amendment is obviously conditional. Now, this is actually in the Constitution because I've read it before and I had to study it for school. But a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state and the right of the people to keep and bear arms, should not be infringed. Meaning, as long as a militia of citizens is necessary and a well-regulated one at that, then what follows is true, but only if that first part pertains. It no longer pertains, and it hasn't since the modern National Guard, was formally established in 1916. Now we've got the Army, we got the Navy, we got the Marines and the Coast Guard and the Air Force, and even Space Force, and even that Space Force thing, as well as the National Guard, with members who swear an oath to both their state and the federal government. And it's noted that dual allegiance for all the anti-federalists still lurking out there, seeking about some tyranny of the federal government, while at the state and local levels that you busy yourself with taking away voting rights, productive rights, public schools, and public libraries. The 6 branches of the armed forces, including National Guard, no other militia need to apply, and it's covered. If you want to help protect the citizen interest of your state and your nation, assist the citizens during emergencies, understand tactical maneuvers, and carry a gun, and learn how to operate it, you can sign up here or here. Now you can join the Coast Guard or you can become a police officer. It turns out that we do need better ones. Your service will be deeply appreciated, but if only by lip service from the right-wingers who drone on and on about how much they love the military and the cops, even though the right-wingers don't. So the need for a well-regulated militia, which is crucial to the early history of the country, is no longer in play. We need to rewrite the amendment dispensing with the oddball capitalization and punctuation to fit the current times. The right of the people to serve in the armed forces or the National Guard, or to serve as law enforcement officers if duly qualified, should not be infringed. I dropped the preparatory clause since everyone ignores it anyway, and that word militia has gotten especially confusing of late. Now the thing is up to date. But don't take my fucking word for it. After the Parkland, Florida school shooting back in 2018, former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens wrote an op-ed in the New York Times describing the Second Amendment as a relic of the 18th century and arguing that it should be repealed. Former Supreme Court Chief Justice Warren Burger, who's a conservative appointed by Richard Nixon, had said back in 1991 that the National Redneck Alliance's reading of the Second Amendment was a fraud, and said that if he were writing the Bill of Rights today, he'd flat out fucking dump it. Now, the current batch of right-wing Supreme Court justices that were sponsored by the Federalist Society have further discredited the High Court by pretending that they can peer into the hearts and minds of the Founding Fathers as a way to keep the country hobbled on this issue. They can't see shit about it, so it's always worth noting, especially again for younger voters, that the Heller decision, in which case Justice Antonin Scalia simply divorced the keep and bear arms part of the Second Amendment from any connection to militia membership, and it was back in 2008 and not way back at the founding of the Republic. We do not live in colonial times, people. We live in these here times, the days of conspiracy theories, white nationalism, and so-called government leaders who do all they can to prove that government cannot work, who praise despots and work with them to undermine democracy, and they call journalists the enemy of the people, and they dehumanize their political opponents. Okay, none of that is entirely new to American history, but today we live in a country where there are more guns than people, where there are more mass shootings than days on the calendar, and where foe has gun-clutching people living on a constant state of paranoia and fear, and where younger people are increasingly playing with their fucking lives, basically. If we could somehow summon up Franklin or Madison or Hamilton to speak to us on this gun issue, I'd imagine that they have a lot to fucking say. And one suspects that the founding fathers who would take a look at modern handguns and assault weapons, they would learn how they operate and tell us a bit more about the intent of the Second Amendment. And they would say, I think that the citizen's right to safety and the pursuit of happiness far outweighs any imagined individual right to own a weapon of war or carry any kind of gun in public. Now, those who claim to be pro-life and pro-gun should be aware that the rest of us consider those terms absurdly absurd, and that we see through the marketing fluff of pro-life used in the place of anti-abortion, as well as the pro-life willingness to let women die in childbirth and abandon kids to lives of poverty. But in this fucking country, where politicians of a certain stripe are busy teaching us that up is down and facts aren't facts, and where the NRA owns many of those politicians, we see people being gunned down every fucking day in every venue one can imagine. Shopping centers, grocery stores, movie theaters, concerts, hospitals, churches, and schools. Places that we should feel fucking safe, but we're not. The vast majority of citizens want sensible gun regulations now. Parents and younger Americans of all political stripes are frustrated and deeply unhappy with the gun culture right now, and with all of its simmering fear and dread about the next news bulletin and days of fruitless discussion of the shooter and his motive, and the hopelessness created by talk of the slippery slope. If we take any action to stop the carnage, this is what political operatives on the right have done so well for decades. They work the refs and move the goalposts until any objections to their aims are no longer recognized as legitimate. That well-regulated militia being necessary becomes courtesy to NRA and Scalia. No militia need apply becomes a tradition with deep roots in our culture, and it becomes a fucking God-given right. Now, this is fucking laughable if it weren't so tragic, and if guns weren't now the leading cause of death of younger Americans. Now, young people recoil at the Second Amendment argument even more than they cringe at that all-out fashion furniture their parents have held up in the basement and are not offering them. But thanks, but no fucking thanks. Parents would like their children and grandchildren to be safe when they're at the movies, in a mall, in a church, or at school. All of us would like to feel safe in the public spaces that we go to every day. But we don't need to hear a single damn thing from a criminal organization like the NRA, or from politicians in the pockets of that criminal organization. The Second Amendment is an antique curiosity, laughably outmoded for our times, and it's time for it to fucking go. Now, we must say it precisely because we have been so bullied for so long into believing that we must not or cannot say it. One day, even if we keep our democracy intact against the frantic efforts of the self-proclaimed American patriots, which are not Trump supporters, because those inbreds are not patriots, the younger Americans will band together to do what they did with the laws against marijuana and will do in short order with restrictions on reproductive rights. Now they'll put the Second Amendment right where it belongs, in the dustbin of history already piled away too high with spent shells and needless deaths. And I agree that Second Amendment's outdated and it needs to fucking go. So if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell, so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. You can also leave a comment, let me know what you think. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little as a few bucks a video or a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.